Alright guys, so we're trying to do round 2 here with a vlog series. I realized after the first one that I did, it's not really scripted, not really reading off any notes or anything, so it was kind of all over the place, so I apologize for that. I realized I left out a lot of stuff that was probably pertinent to the first vlog, where I talked about first getting sick and getting diagnosed, and I didn't really talk about a lot of my symptoms. So I guess in this one maybe I'll just focus on that a little bit, because maybe some people out there can relate to that, or you're dealing with those symptoms and you don't know yet that you have Lyme, or you've been diagnosed with something else. So I had mentioned before that I first started noticing some weird things happening, I think as early as 2011, with some fatigue things. And actually I got, that year I got mononucleosis, I think earlier in the year, and it took me a very long time to recover from that. I remember like leading into the fall, I was kind of coming out of it, and I kept trying to do a lot of cardio exercise, specifically on a road bike, and I would relapse. My symptoms would relapse, and I'd be sick for a couple weeks all over again. And I think it took until October where I built up a little bit of resistance that year, and I could exercise without making myself sick, but was still dealing like with a chronic sore throat. And literally I would come home from work, this would be my regimen, I would come home from work, take a quick power nap, and then take like Dayquil, or like this other type of cough syrup. I think it was like Dacim or something like that, and just to coat my throat a little bit because it hurt. And that never really went away. And I think I wouldn't say I was 100% recovered from that until January of 2012. But I'd also mentioned that around, I think in that year and even in 2012, even though like physically I was really healthy, there were some weird cognitive things going on. I was becoming antisocial, I should say, not wanting to hang out with my friends as much, a lot of irritability. I was very irritable, I had sound sensitivity, and I really struggled falling asleep at night and just getting really like rock solid sleep. And I would say that I never really typically dealt with anxiety, but I feel like I was more anxious during that period of time. And eventually I'd say, you know, for the most part 2012 was a pretty healthy year for me, except in the summer, I'd say around like June time frame, I had been racing mountain bikes. I'd done a couple of races already, and I was training consistently every week, and I was out on a training ride and my legs just stopped working. I was only about an hour into it, so wasn't really characteristic of like hitting a wall or truly bonking. But it's almost like my muscles were just like locking up almost. I mean, I've never had MS, but I think from what I've read, I would compare it to that. And it seemed like purely neurological, like my muscle fibers were not responding to what my brain was telling it to do. And following that, for the weeks following that, my muscles were just really sore and weak, and overall I was just really fatigued, and it was just kind of like this really weird fatigue that wouldn't go away with sleep, and I just didn't feel good. And so I laid off the bicycle for I think 2 solid weeks, and then in that period of time I kind of picked up dirt bike riding again a little bit, and I think that helped me recover a little bit, just because I was using different muscles but still getting out and exercising a little bit. So once I was feeling better, got back on the bike, and for the rest of that year never really had an issue. And throughout that winter I felt really strong and was training a lot, but again still was dealing with those cognitive issues, just the antisocial behavior, irritability, some anxiety, poor sleep. And I think another thing that was a problem for me too was I noticed I was starting to have almost like a speech impediment. Like I would start stuttering a little bit, and I was having a hard time finding words, which was weird for me because I was usually a pretty fast talker and could think very quickly. my riding as well. I mean, when I was doing technical writing at work, it would take me forever to write a paragraph. And I didn't really make much of it at the time. I mean, it's so hard to see things like that from the outside looking in. Like, sometimes, you know, symptoms progress in an insidious manner, and you just don't even recognize that you're kind of becoming somebody else. And in that case, that's what happened. I mean, looking back on it, I could say, dang, man, I was changing a lot, and I should have recognized it at that point in time. But I mean, hindsight is 20/20, and I just didn't know at the time. So anyways, you know, I went through 2013 feeling pretty healthy other than those cognitive issues, and I had a very good season on the mountain bike. I had a major life change that year too. I moved from the East Coast, where I had lived my entire life, out to the West Coast. It had always been my dream to do that. I was excited to get into warmer temperatures and be able to be outside all the time and just enjoy the area and just enjoy the landscape out here. I mean, it provided everything that I love to do, and it lets you do it year-round. So I was psyched on it. In the first 7 months that I was out here, I was just having the time of my life. I mean, joined some cycling clubs, got a lot of really cool mountain biking in, found all these awesome spots, just had a killer overall season. I did, I remember I had done a time trial on my road bike, and I'm not really even a road bike racer, but I train on that predominantly for cross-country mountain bike racing. So I went out there just as like a warm-up race, and I had the fastest time in my group, and I think there's two other people that had a faster time than me, and they were both pros. So I felt pretty good about that. And then from there, I went and competed in a couple of elite level mountain bike races and did pretty well. It was my first season competing at that level, and it was surprising me for only really being able to dedicate myself to training for 3 years. I did quite well, and I was really happy with it. But going into that fall, I didn't let off as much as I should have, and I kept training hard. I ended up getting the flu in October of 2013. I rebounded from that, started training again, felt pretty good. But I realized my recovery from my workouts was getting really, really slow. And it was getting progressively harder for me to ride, and I was enjoying it less and less. And my sleep was getting worse and worse. I would have a hard time falling asleep, have a hard time staying asleep, and I would have early morning waking. And I would have kind of like this, some people describe it as like a wired but tired feeling. Like you're so wired that you can't fall asleep, but you're exhausted and you know you need to sleep. And that's like one of the most frustrating feelings to have. But coming into December of that year of 2013, I got like a small head cold, and I never really recovered from it. And things just kept on getting progressively worse. And I remember being out on a training ride, and my legs locked up again, much like they had a couple years prior. And it felt like it was purely like neurological. Like my muscles were just not listening to what my brain was telling it to do. And that was actually the last training ride that I ever did since I got sick. So it was over 3 years ago now. Which sucks to say, you know, I haven't been able to get back to that, but I have gotten a lot better. But you know, progressing from that point, you know, I got a lot worse before I got better. And I remember all sorts of weird things started happening. Started having a really bad sore throat. My sleeping problems got even worse. You know, obviously got really depressed because I couldn't figure out what's going on. I was just going from doctor to doctor, and they didn't have answers for me. Some of them thought that I just had reactivated my mono. And oh man, if I had $1 for every doctor that told me, "Oh, you're young, just give it a couple weeks or give it a couple months, and you're gonna be feeling better." I see people go through this all the time. You're gonna be fine. Stop worrying about it. Well, it never got better. And it just kept on getting worse. And then I started having problems with heart palpitations. Like I just felt this heavy heartbeat, like it was beating out of my chest when I was just sitting at my desk at work. And then I started having these problems where I'd would go from, like, if I'd been laying down for a little bit or sitting down for a little bit and I got up quick, I would almost pass out, and a couple times it did. I remember there was 2 instances when I was living by myself that had got up quickly, walked into the bathroom and passed out. I fell backwards and cracked my head off my bathtub, and I woke up just looking at my floor, having no idea where I was at or what had happened. It took me a little while to put it together. Like, I went in there and I passed out. I think after that I started taking it a lot more serious. I'm like, look, something's definitely wrong and somebody needs to get to the bottom of this. It's like, I remember being so fatigued too, where it's like I was barely making it through an 8-hour shift at work, and I would just come home and be so exhausted there was nothing I could do. And it's just like, all my muscles were in pain. They were stiff, muscle soreness, joint pain. I remember my hips hurt really bad, almost as if I had arthritis. For some reason, it was most pronounced in my hips than it was anywhere else in my body. I also remember having really sore soles on the bottom of my feet. Like, I just couldn't stand for probably more than an hour at work without just being in excruciating pain. And I had swelling, this weird swelling in my legs that would often wake me up at night because my socks would be cutting off the circulation at my ankles, and it would literally be digging into my skin. And I'd have to take my socks off because they were that swollen. And you know, I was still struggling with cognitive problems. Those got worse. A lot of brain fog, a lot of word retrieval problems, even worse, stuttering, which made me really self-conscious, and I started becoming even more antisocial because I was embarrassed about the fact that I couldn't get out a sentence without stumbling over my words, which obviously didn't help me. I mean, I was pretty much isolated at that point, and that'll probably be something else that I talk about in a future vlog. But you know, overall, I mean, all that pain that I went through, it's so hard for people to put into words, but I've broken, I think, 16 bones throughout my dirt bike racing career, had half a dozen surgeries, 8 concussions, I have hardware in my body, I've gotten strep throat multiple times, I've gotten pneumonia, I had mono, and I'm telling you right now, I would go through all of those things all over again if I could just not feel those feelings of Lyme disease for another day. You know, if somebody could give me that option and say, well, I can cure you of Lyme disease, but you have to go through all that crap all over again, I would willingly take that. I would take that any day, man. It's just really that bad. And it's so hard to tell somebody who's never experienced it how bad it is you can't compare it to anything. There is no comparison. I mean, you just have days where it's like, man, you just straight up feel like you're gonna die. I mean, I remember there's days where I'd wake up from naps and it felt like someone was physically holding me down, like I could not move. And I remember sending text messages to my family back east, just being like, I really don't know what's going on, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it out the other side of this, you know. And I've heard of other people saying the same things, like they just didn't know. They would go to bed, you know, telling their family that they loved them and wishing them well, and just not knowing. And it's just like, man, what a scary position to be in. But eventually, once I got on board with the right doctors, I figured out what I was dealing with. Slowly but surely, things started to change. And, you know, it wasn't big improvements, but it was small improvements over a long period of time. And, you know, I think I started my treatment in the fall of 2014, and it took me till about the midsummer of 2015 before I could start doing physical exercise. But, you know, my stamina had improved a little bit over time from that point. And I'll get into that more in future vlogs and go through specifically what treatments worked for me, what treatments didn't, you know, what helped out the most, what made me feel the best. And like I said, just go through some of the hardships that people with chronic illnesses go through. I mean, I've seen other things online and people talking about, you know, isolation and just how you manage relationships when you're in a spot like that. And it's helpful to listen to how other people cope with it. Everybody brings something different to the table and something really insightful to think about. And, you know, hopefully there's at least one thing that someone can apply to their life and be like, oh yeah, you know, that kind of works for me. Or at a minimum, you can kind of just be like, yeah, somebody else is going through that struggle too, and just know that, yeah, you're not alone in it. There's people that are sharing that journey with you, and I truly believe, you know, if you stay persistent and keep fighting, you will make it out. You'll make it out of this, and I really believe that, you know, we will be better people at the end of the day. I mean, I don't know how anybody could go through something like this and not be a better person for it. But you know, I'm sorry for talking super fast. I'm on such a tight schedule. Today was such a rough day at work, and I kind of bounced from that and going to kind of a social event right now and riding dirt bikes with some friends. Seems like the only time I can do these is when I'm driving. So thank you for your time, and I hope you guys are doing well. As always, rest up, and until next time, just take it easy.